The courtroom was completely silent. The moment I first looked at the man standing in front of me, I immediately knew this man is not here to lose. Expensive suit, confident body language, and that look in his eyes. Like he already won. I looked straight at him and asked, "Do you owe this woman $8,000? He didn't waste even a second. Absolutely not. Fast, direct, full of confidence, like he was completely sure no one could touch him. Then I turned to the woman. Her hands were slightly shaking, but her voice was surprisingly strong. He took money from me and promised to pay it back. 2 people, 1 story, but only 1 truth. I closed the file and started observing both of them, because often truth isn't in words. It's in reactions. The man was relaxed, almost bored, like this didn't matter to him at all. The woman, on the other hand, was nervous but focused, like she was telling the truth, but unsure if anyone would believe her. And that's when I started to have doubts. I asked the next question. What was the money for? She took a deep breath and said, I helped him when his business was struggling. He said it was temporary. That word temporary stuck in my mind. I immediately looked at him and asked, your business was struggling? He let out a small laugh, the kind that shows he's insulted by the question. My business has never struggled, and just like that I knew something wasn't right. Because if he's telling the truth, then why did he take the money? And if she's telling the truth, then why is he so confident? Both of those things cannot be true at the same time. There was a slight murmur in the courtroom. Everyone was confused. And honestly, so was I, but one thing was clear. Somebody here is lying, and they're doing it with confidence. And when someone lies that confidently, their fall is always more dramatic. I made a decision. I wasn't going to rush. I was going to let them speak and expose themselves. I turned to the woman and asked, do you have any proof? She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then softly said, yes. I do. Her answer was simple, but her tone was very strong, like she knew whatever she had was going to change everything. I signaled her, show it. She slowly opened her folder and pulled out a document. Her hands were still slightly shaking, but now her eyes showed less fear and more confidence. At that moment, the entire courtroom focused on that paper. But I had a strange feeling this is not going to be simple, because experience has taught me not. All evidence tells the truth, and not every truth is easy to see. And what she was about to show was not just going to affect this case. It was going to turn the entire story upside down in a way nobody expected. The document in her hand was now the center of the entire room as everyone leaned in, including the man who, just a moment ago, had been full of confidence but now had slightly changed his posture just enough for me to notice. I motioned for her to speak and asked, tell me what this is. She swallowed hard, placed the paper on the desk and said, this is the agreement he gave me. When I helped him and the room went completely quiet, I picked up the paper and saw that it was simple, a handwritten note with no official formatting or legal structure, just words and a signature. I read it carefully, and the moment I saw it, I understood the direction this case was going, but I didn't react yet, because reacting too soon gives away control. I looked at him and asked, is this your signature? He leaned back slightly and said, it is, without hesitation, still confident, which made things interesting. I placed the document back down and said, then explain it, and now the pressure shifted to him as he had to speak. He smiled and said, that's not a loan agreement, it's just a written understanding. A thank you, claiming it was gratitude for $8,000 that he never intended to repay. Now the room shifted again because both sides were presenting completely different truths. I turned back to her and asked, is that true? Her eyes widened as she quickly responded, no. That's not true. He said he would pay me back. Her voice cracking slightly as she added that he had said it multiple times. I leaned forward and asked, do you have proof of that? She hesitated for just a moment, and that hesitation told me something important before she finally said, yes. I have messages. Now we were getting somewhere because words can be argued, but written messages are harder to explain. She took out her phone, opened the conversation, and I asked her to read it aloud. She began reading, you said, don't worry, I'll return your money soon. The man immediately reacted, saying, that's not what I meant. And that sudden interruption, that slight panic, was exactly what I was looking for. I raised my hand and said, let her finish, and she continued reading, and then you said, this is just temporary, I'll handle it. I looked at him again and asked, did you say that? He hesitated for just a second, and that second was enough. Yes. But he began, but I cut him off, saying, there is no but, and now his confidence was starting to crack, slowly but clearly. The room fell into complete silence as I leaned back and thought, because something still didn't feel right. The agreement, the messages, the words, they all pointed in one direction, but I've seen this before. People don't always lie completely. Sometimes they bend the truth just enough to benefit themselves. I looked at both of them and asked, let me ask you this. If this was just a thank you, why was there so much communication about returning the money? The room stayed silent, but that question changed everything. The man looked uncomfortable, while the woman looked hopeful, and that told me everything I needed to know, because when the truth is on your side, you don't panic, but when it's not, you struggle. And I could clearly see that struggle beginning to show, but I still wasn't finished, because there was more to this story, and what I was about to uncover next would expose something far deeper than just money, something personal, something hidden, and something that would completely change the outcome of this case. The courtroom felt heavier now, like the air itself had changed, and that happens when the truth starts getting close. I looked at both of them and said, let's slow this down, because now I wasn't just looking at documents anymore. I was looking at people. I turned to him and said, you said this was a thank you. He nodded, still holding on to his story. Yes, I continued, but in your own messages you mentioned returning the money. He paused slightly. I meant it differently. I leaned forward, explained differently. Now the pressure was real. He adjusted his tie and said, I meant, if things worked out, I would return it. If things worked out, that's not a promise, that's a possibility. I turned to her and asked, did he ever clearly say it was a loan? She immediately responded, yes. Multiple times. He said it was temporary, that I would get it back. Her voice was stronger now. At this point, both sides were fully exposed, but something still felt off. Both were mixing truth with emotion, and that's where cases get complicated. I looked at him again and asked, why did you accept money if you didn't consider it a loan? He didn't answer right away, and that pause mattered. Because I needed it, he finally said. I needed help. But I didn't see it as debt. I nodded slowly. So you accepted help. But didn't plan to return it. He replied, correct. Now the room understood this wasn't just a disagreement. This was expectation versus reality. I turned to the woman, you expected repayment. She nodded, yes. I looked back at him. And you didn't intend to repay. He said, not in the way she thinks. And just like that, the entire case shifted, because now this wasn't about lying. It was about misunderstanding. But then something changed. The woman spoke again, her voice different now. That's not true. He promised me. Because I helped him when he had nothing. Now we had something deeper: emotion, history, trust. I looked at him. Is that true? For the first time, he didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation told me everything. Because now this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, and trust is harder to defend than any contract. There's a moment in every courtroom when everything becomes clear, and that moment had finally arrived. I looked at both of them not as opposing sides, but as people who trusted each other once, and lost that trust along the way. I took a deep breath and said, here's what I see. The room went silent. I see a woman who helped someone she believed in, I said, pausing for a moment, and I see a man who accepted that help, but didn't see it the same way. I leaned forward. This isn't about lying. Both of them looked up. This is about expectations that were never aligned. Now the energy shifted, not anger, not defense, but understanding. You gave money thinking it would come back, I said, looking at her. Then I turned to him, and he accepted it as support. Not debt. I looked back at him. But you should have been clearer. His expression changed, slight guilt, slight realization. And you, I said, turning back to her, should have made your expectations clear from the beginning. Silence. Complete silence. Because now both of them understood this wasn't one-sided. It was shared responsibility. I made my decision. This case is dismissed. No hesitation, no drama, just truth. The woman looked down, not angry, just emotional. The man sat quietly, processing everything. And before they left, I said one last thing: money can be replaced. But misunderstandings like this can destroy relationships forever. They didn't speak because they knew it was true. And as they walked out of the courtroom, they didn't leave as enemies. They left as two people who learned a hard lesson. And me? I sat back, thinking about how many times this exact story repeats itself in different ways, because in life, the biggest conflicts aren't always about money. They're about communication. And what's left unsaid. I'm Judge Judy. And in my courtroom, the truth always finds its way out.